Hello. I think everyone has their seats. All right, good evening everyone and welcome to tonight's Brisbane Open House Fringe event. I'm Leah Lang, the Queensland Government Architect. It's lovely to see a full half a theatre. I think Steve was like, I thought we had the whole theatre. No, we just have this small intimate gathering to see this Designing with Heritage event. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather this evening, the Turrbal and Yagara peoples of Meanjin, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples here with us tonight. This event is hosted by the Queensland Government Architect and the venue and catering has been generously provided by the Princess Theatre team. So please enjoy yourself and grab another beverage from the bar and get ready for a dialogue that sits within a broader conversation that we are having across Queensland about the role of heritage in shaping our future. Not as something static or constrained, but as something dynamic, valuable and full of potential. Shortly, you'll hear a brief presentation from Dr. Catherine Chatburn, she can wave, and myself introducing a document called QHeritage, which is a newly released document that is a state design guideline to seek how we reframe our approach to heritage. It is about positioning, sorry, just checking I'm doing the microphone properly. It is about positioning heritage as a catalyst for design excellence, supporting thoughtful adaptation and unlocking long-term value in communities and places. Following that, we are very fortunate to be joined by an outstanding panel who will bring together client, architectural and policy perspectives. Please join me in welcoming Steve Wilson, AM, Dr. James Davidson, you can just wave hello down the front, David Gold, AM, and Dr. Catherine Chatburn. Yay. The discussion will draw on real projects, including the Princess Theatre, which we're lucky enough to be in tonight, and the residential project Home, tracing the journey from vision through to delivery and the challenges of working within heritage contexts and, importantly, the values these projects create for community and place. Sorry, lots of notes today. We'll conclude with some questions from the audience, so I do encourage you to think about these questions as the conversation unfolds. We're aiming to finish by 7:45 to allow for some time for the panellists to mingle with the audience and for some more discussions. Thank you again for being here and I hope you enjoy the event. All right. Thank you. So just a brief touch on what the government of the Queensland Government, the Queensland Government Architect's Office does. So we influence and support the delivery of better built environment for all Queenslanders. We sit under Public Works, but we offer a holistic service to all departments in government, which could be education, it can be health, it can be transport, and we're working on the Olympics as well. So we offer design advice and policy guidance and project delivery services. So most people just don't necessarily see us, but we do help a lot behind the scenes. So the release of the QHeritage document was based on an invitation from the Queensland Heritage Council. It was when my predecessor, Malcolm Middleton, who is in the audience tonight, released Q Design, which is the state's urban design document. The Heritage Council said this would be really valuable if it had a really strong focus on heritage. So therefore, there's always been this premise that we should do a complementary document to Q Design that really frames up and supports heritage, particularly in Queensland. So bless the time frame, that's just how it rolls in government. But the invitation was a while ago, but we have released the document really recently, this month. So as I mentioned, it was developed with my office, so the Office of Queensland Government Architect with the Heritage branch. And it's part of the Queensland Q Design series. So we had a consultant, Lovell Chen Architects, who are in Melbourne but were formerly Alum Lovell in Brisbane, with additional local urban design and heritage insights. So we did a huge amount of engagement with key heritage industry representatives through panels, through local government and private and public sector to make sure that we really made sure it's a really usable document. And some of the team before my time presented at the Heritage Conference in Rockhampton. So this is our Q Design document, which has 9 principles. It's to guide the delivery of well-designed places across Queensland. It talks about context, it talks about leadership, it talks about designing for climate, considering character and place. They're very high level but very powerful elements to good environmental design for architecture and urban design of good places. It has been launched back in 2018. We are now looking at refreshing this document, but it has a very strong cultural reception across architects, urban design, landscape architects. So many people and a lot of councils will refer to that document within their planning schemes. Out of the 9 principles, number 2 is one that really hooks into the QHeritage document, so it is to be inspired by local place, character, form and culture. So this is our document. The document on to the right is actually one of the Heritage Unit's documents, so a lot more technical. We call this a bridging document then. So QHeritage will take from macro design principles through to your technical detail, but provide that narrative to help people and step them through what is quite a complex process regarding heritage. So I will pass to Kat.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Leah. That's all right. Hello, everybody. So I'm just going to briefly introduce you to the QHeritage document. The Government Architect's Office, all of these resources that you can see, so Q Design and this, are available online. You'll each have received one of the little postcards on your seat. The QR code that looks like a postage stamp, if you scan that, it'll give you a direct link to the actual document, the PDF of the full document. So basically, QHeritage builds from that principle in Q Design and expands and seeks to sort of introduce people in a nice sort of gentle way into the opportunities and the value of heritage. It's a guidance document, so very much sort of encourages anyone and everyone. It's written for anybody in the same way that Q Design is also written for anybody. And it's part of that suite. And really what this resource is about is encouraging people to see the ways in which we can produce better design outcomes, better place outcomes through good design, and the qualities of good design that you can lean into to create the kind of outcomes that you've got here. Next one. So fundamentally, what is QHeritage about? We wanted to debunk this idea that sort of heritage is difficult, and encourage people to see sort of the real value of working with heritage, to lean into the difficulties and see the possibilities. It defines 4 attitudes, so 4 simple ideas of an approach to working with a heritage asset, whether that's a building or a place, and opens an understanding of what sort of heritage is. It also maps out a kind of an easy access process. So working in the built environment, working with buildings, places, is very much a journey. So the document has a section that is a process, and we've included some examples, both in terms of Queensland examples, but some from elsewhere, because across the world we all grapple with the issue of how we make sure heritage is part of the future of the built fabric of places. It's structured in 3 simple sections. So the first section is very much an insight into what is heritage. Discuss. Sort of there's a lot of words and sort of meaning around heritage, and what we've tried to do in the first section is just say simply, this is heritage. You'll see that the document, yes, there is heritage regulation and there's designations, but we're encouraging people to see this document as a way to work with those, but also anything that might be of age but of cultural or heritage value. Next one. What it also includes is a few little sort of timeline diagrams as well. And in these diagrams, what we've done is try to just highlight the relationship between our heritage and our evolution as a community, and how that has been an influence on the places that we inhabit. So very much sort of the conditions of a time or culture or an identity have been influential in shaping the way buildings are, etc. So we've got a couple of little timelines that just pick on those relative to Queensland in particular. Next one. The next section of the document is this sort of 4 simple ideas of an attitude of working with heritage that will really set you up for success, or more effective success, maybe. So those 4 ideas are reveal. So really understand what is this place, what is this building, what is this element that I'm dealing, what is its history, and then the opportunity to rethink what could it be for the future? What do I want it to be that works with that heritage, but also what is its value into the future? So it encourages people to rethink purpose and role within the context, obviously, of kind of heritage conditions. The reimagine is then sort of like the point at which more professionals and design teams start to work with what we often call the fabric of a building, how we actually kind of work with what we've got as a physical idea and maybe rethink and make sure it's suited for now. And then finally, the reconnect, which is really important. The opportunity through a heritage project like this one, for example, very much like this one, to actually reconnect the community to a place that's had significance historically, maybe has kind of, sort of been used for something else or has not been used for a long time. But all of a sudden, the reimagining of a building can reconnect a community with a place and breathe that new life into a physical fabric. Finally, penultimately, we've got this approach. And like I said, it's just a very simple sequence. Like I said, all built environment projects are a journey that you go on together with a very diverse group of people. Some people you'll be working with closely, some people you'll have to talk to. So what we've tried to do is just set out really simply key steps in that process that are helpful to understand, so that if you go for a hike, you want to know the hike you're going on, what are going to be the conditions or what you need to be prepared. So we've tried to do 4 simple steps to just guide you on that journey so you're ready to know what to do. And then finally, in the back of the document, we've got a resource of not really case studies, but project examples that we wanted to kind of introduce people to. And they're collected under 4 key typologies, recognising that sort of heritage can be at a precinct scale. So, for example, in this area here, Stanley Street, these buildings, there is a precinct of really important and interesting buildings and places. How we deal with heritage in proximity, so where we might be dealing with taller buildings, and a good way of working with those taller buildings in terms of maybe smaller heritage elements. This is Perth, which very, I think, sort of is a precinct, but also you've got a good example of proximity as well. Street scale integration. So where you have a fabric that might be heritage, and how that can be really powerful in creating character and place. And then finally, again, sort of bringing us back here, the adaptive reuse of a single building. So that's effectively a very quick introduction to QHeritage as a resource. Would the panel like to now join us? I can't call it a stage. What would you call it? On the precipice? On the edge? I'll give you that back, Leah.
Just let me press these.
Oh yeah, go. There you go.
Excellent, thank you. Great, excellent. So now the panel are going to take their seats in this very compressed area here. Wherever you like, James can sit, whatever you're comfortable. Yes, you go. And I'll try not to sit on the laptop. We're very close. I know. Excellent. All right, so now we're going to head into our Q&A session. So I've got a few questions here that we'll run through. We've got some beautiful images that will just sort of rotate through on the screen behind us, specifically about home and Princess Theatre. And then we'll open up to the audience. So as I mentioned, please, think of your questions, because we will throw it open. I don't think we have a roving mic, do we? No. Oh, I need to keep it up higher. Okay, so I'm going to start with Steve. Okay, Steve, can you take us back to the moment that you and Jane first seriously contemplated taking on Lamb House? What drew you to it? And what were the doubts or hesitations you had to push through at the start of that journey, knowing that you've always had a long love and commitment to heritage places?
Well, I think, I don't know the precise first moment, but like many people in Brisbane, if you go up on Kangaroo Point Cliff, which is an amazing place to look at Brisbane, there was always this sort of extraordinary house sitting perched on top of the hill. You asked me, so I'll speak for me, but Jane as well. We, like many people in Brisbane, we just loved the sort of whole, what it looked like. And it was, at one level, it was like a sort of a ghost house, wasn't it? Later on, particularly after it became dilapidated. So it had this sort of aura as well as a physical look. So I'd always known of it, and but I didn't know the specific details. And the architect who we were using at the time was a distinguished fellow called Rob Riddell, and we were using him because we had a heritage house ourselves that we'd bought in Dornoch Terrace in Highgate Hill, and he actually he had the plans because he loved it all, and he showed us the plans. So I kind of had this thought, well, if ever the opportunity comes up, and if ever, back then there's no way I could have afforded it, but if I'm kind of do well enough in life that I can afford it, it was on my sort of wouldn't it be great to list. So yeah, I think it began way back then.
That's great. So we might go, keeping things gorgeous and positive, is the high point of the journey. So if you had to single out one moment in the home journey that encapsulates why it was all worth it, either a day on the site, a space coming together, a particular view, what would it be, and why did it land so powerfully with you?
Look, I think there were probably two moments. I'll cheat and give two answers. The first was once we'd effectively saved home. That was what we were trying to do, was because it was falling over. It was 10 minutes to midnight towards destruction. And there was a moment when it was safe enough to physically go there. And I remember we were sitting on, it was Jane and I, and we had this great team working with us, including David Gold and many other wonderful people. But it was just Jane and I, and we stood out on that veranda which faces down over the city and just looked down at this extraordinary boom city of ours and thought, oh my God, we've saved this place, and now we can just look forward to a future of enjoying this place. And you know, that was a very special moment. And look, the other one was a strange one. I was at home by myself. I'd exercised in the morning and I was a bit tired, so I was lying down on a weekend, and Jane was away, and then I heard this noise, this sort of banging thing, and anyway, I went to the door, and there was a homeless person there, and this fellow he stunk of stuff, booze or whatever it was, and he had no front teeth and everything, and I thought, oh gosh, how do I deal with this? And he said, oh mate, I just wanted to come in and tell you, I used to live here. And I just love what you've done for this place, right? And it was fantastic, you know, because some of the homeless people weren't as nice as this guy. But anyway, and he said, look, I've got my whole life back together again. I'm off the whatever he was on. I'm resurrected and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, how do I handle this? Because he still looked like a meth head or something, right? And I said, okay, that's good, thanks. I said, look, Bruce, it's really good, thank you, but in future, do you mind actually contacting me sort of before you just come in? Because he was literally outside the bedroom door. But anyway, but I think that's symbolic of that's indicative of the fact that so many people in Brisbane love that place, not just, you know, sort of top of the financial pile.
Yeah, there were moments where lots of people had accessed that site. Probably you were assuming they were having less access.
A lot of traditional custodians of that place, let me assure you.
Now I'll throw to you, David. So I guess given that, you know, you have lived and breathed heritage projects for the majority of your professional career, when you first walked through Lamb House, what did you see that perhaps others didn't in terms of its heritage values, its risks, its latent design potential, and how did that initial reading shape your approach to the project?
It's a big question, but certainly it was kind of quite terrifying. In fact, the first time we walked through, and I guess everyone's seen some of the images, but the house was in a very, very precarious state. So I guess, first of all, I saw risk and, you know, really managing that because to sort of paint the picture, there was a, you know, big hole in the roof. There'd been, you know, water coming in for probably about 10 years. The box gutters had failed. So there was a lot of damage, a lot of deteriorated building fabric. So I guess, one of the first things was, you know, how do we manage that? How do we, you know, make the site safe? And, you know, particularly worried about, you know, Steve and Jane and keeping them, alive so that we could actually do the project because, you know, there were ceilings falling down and bits of tile falling off. And I think part of that tower roof that you can see actually just sort of fell off very sort of early on. So incredibly dangerous site. But of course, we had to spend time to understand the issues and the condition and how to manage it. So we did have to, really engage with the site. So I suppose in terms of heritage values, I mean, one of the interesting things was that once you sort of got past the sort of the terror of, the decayed state, you could actually see that, it was actually very much intact. And even though a lot of the building fabric was quite deteriorated, there was all the evidence there. And so that, you could actually work out how, what was missing, what was original, what's in good condition, what can be repaired, and start to then sort of, scope out the project ahead. So, yeah, while it was very daunting, I was glad I'd done a few other projects first, I have to say.
Not your first rodeo, that would be a bit panicky. All right, so I'll throw to James now. And James, you have a huge, obviously, back catalogue as well in heritage, but you also specialise in resilience. Mm-hmm. So when Lamb House sits on a spectacular but very exposed site, how do you approach the intersection between heritage conservation, climate risk and contemporary performance? And where did you draw the line between necessary intervention and overreach?
Good question. Before I answer that, the other reason for protecting home was because Jane and Steve have a habit of actually just meandering through everything. So on weekends, it was about protecting their life, right? Like we even today we have to give them lectures about, please don't go on site this weekend. Please don't have your family on site this weekend. Please don't invite 20 friends over and have a glass of wine. Anyway. But the intersection between climate risk and heritage is, it's really interesting because we are now creating the heritage of tomorrow, right? So therefore, I actually think, and it is a legacy, obviously, and I know we don't like those words, but at the moment we're thinking about the Lamb family, but in 100 years' time we'll be thinking about the Wilson family, because they have actually, but in doing that at the same time, the old house, when we first got there, did give us some really good indications about why it was failing. And so it was really interesting. It was really primarily to do with the roof, obviously. Mm. So given that its location is on the top of the cliffs, it's pretty exposed. So the first thing we did was actually look at, well, why did it actually fail? And it was mainly due to the box gutters, to be honest. So we then found a way of inhabiting the attic space and removing quite a lot of the box gutters in a way. So we actually used a lot of them. But you can't tell from looking back at it, which is good. And so for me, the whole climate stuff is actually just symbiotic with a living heritage of the future, in the sense that we had the JCU cyclone testing station, give us some ideas about how to do the battening and the under tile kind of substrate, and it came through Cyclone Alfred really well, like with those high winds that we had, and so I think for me it's just a natural fit with the climate stuff and heritage buildings. And a lot of the interesting things about old heritage buildings is they're very resilient a lot of the time. So, I mean, they were made for, in a different time, but interesting. It's we see that a lot. So.
That's a great insight, thank you. I'll throw back to Steve. So to discuss balancing legacy, family and future use, which is something James just touched on, was Lamb House is both a deeply personal home as well as a highly public heritage landmark. So how did you and your family reconcile those dual identities, private life, public legacy, and has that balance shifted now that the project's complete and people are experiencing home in person?
Well, firstly, I think heritage is so much more than just the physical form. And a lot of people think you go in and save a building and fix it up, and then you say, well, what's going to go there? So there's only so many schools of arts and, sort of Royal Geographical Societies or whatever who can go into these things, and they're all important bodies, not being derogatory there. But in the case of home, it's its entire function is a family home, which the Lamb family had for 120 years. So to me, heritage is what I said, it's about use as well. So it's a family home. Fortunately, Jane and I have a big family. We've got 5 kids and 6 grandkids and blah, blah, blah. So we've returned it to being a family home again, because the Lambs originally had a big family and then gradually they ended up with none. So Joy Lamb, they didn't have kids. So that's easy. That's not us being heroes for society. That's just we're going in and we're going to use it for its purpose. By the way, we've saved home and we've renovated that, blah, blah, blah. But we're now, if you drive past, there's a huge building program going on at the moment. So we're putting a garden and a whole bunch of stuff in. So that's what James was referring to when he said we can't go inside. But but then when it's finished, it'll be a modern, an updated version. In other words, the original house will be fully respectful of all heritage principles, but there'll be some new stuff which is more modern, because you don't have servants now. When that house was built, wealthy people had servants. So you had tiny little kitchens out the back and maids would come out and serve up all the food. So, and now you live around a kitchen. So we're modernising the whole thing, and then we're building an amazing garden because we're gardeners as well. But all of that is just, what does today's family want in a family home? In terms of the legacy thing, or people coming to visit, we said at the time when we made our offer to buy it that we would give the opportunity for people to come and see it. And we've already had one function there with Brisbane Open House. And we've also had some other charitable functions. We did something for the Brisbane Festival. We've done a bunch of things. And now it's a building site, so we can't do anything. But when we finished it, we'll do that again. I don't think we'll have... there's a limit to how much you want people to come in, obviously, because it's your own private house and you don't want people rummaging through your private rooms and that sort of thing. But we might have some garden things. But we'll definitely have functions there. And we can contain those that they don't go into the private rooms. And, hey, it's a thing to celebrate, so why not do this? And it's a lovely way to promote the causes that we believe in, which seems to be endless and growing. So that's the main goal. But, that's how we... Is that the answer? I think so.
I think that's a great answer of how you balance the legacy and the public interest with a home that is deep down a home. So I'm going to throw to Kath now. So we're talking about making heritage easier to navigate by using our QHeritage document. So if it positions itself as a practical tool to make heritage an opportunity and not an impost, and to reduce uncertainty in the system, from your perspective, how can a document like this tangibly support owners, so specifically owners, but also guide designers and regulators to have the kind of constructive design-led conversations that projects like Home require?
Yeah, thanks, Leah. I think from my perspective in the development of the document, I think what consistently was important is the need for kind of a clarity across the diversity of people that get involved in projects, diversity of experience, diversity of understanding, and diversity of desire of what needs to be done. So I think a little bit of what I said before, all building projects, all projects in the built environment are a journey, and aspects of the journey you're not quite sure what's going to happen. But if you have this kind of an understanding of the terrain you might be entering, and a little bit of a guide for the roadmap you might need to navigate it, and that guide is actually accessible to everybody, I think the fact that anyone can access this resource online, you just download it, and it's very accessible. It's not a huge weighty thing and lost in a lot of sort of complex language. I think for me, it's capacity to maybe bring more people to understand the journey they're about to go on and how to be part of that journey effectively because of how it's set out. For me, probably that's, I think, what its value hopefully will be to a lot more people.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to throw this to both David and James, so I'll give you my microphone in a minute. The QHeritage guidance talks about heritage as a strategic asset in placemaking and about treating heritage as something to design with rather than around. How did you and the team practically embed that attitude in the way new elements were conceived and detailed, not just at home and Princess, but at other projects?
I don't mind. Do you want to go first?
I think I've been thinking about how to answer this question, and I thought, I'll just be... So when I first started, so JDA's been around for 17 years, almost soon, so it's good. The early days of my practice, as always with, setting out, you don't realise you got yourself into a dark place until you're in the dark place. And one of those dark places was literally working with clients who just like to slice and dice heritage buildings. And it was kind of like always an impost, but they bought the buildings because they could basically negotiate a lower price. That's why they bought the buildings. They didn't actually buy the buildings because they were in love with heritage. They bought them because they could justify that heritage buildings were problematic and therefore they could buy them at a cheaper price. And then I saw the damage and the kind of death by 1,000 cuts, and I was kind of involved in quite a bit of that. And then eventually I met through Steve and Jane, I met David, and some of the thing that's impressed me is it actually just takes a little bit of extra thought, and engaging early in a process is critical, and it's actually harder to go the other way, I think personally, because it creates a lot of drama, and so it's nice to be now at this stage with clients who support engagement and actually have the means to. And that might be something we get into in a little bit. Maybe David can talk about that. But it does cost a little bit more, obviously, because there's quite a lot of deeper thought that needs to go into things necessarily. But the thought is the key, and you can work most things out. You don't just have to demolish it. I'm talking about, people going in on a Saturday night at midnight and demolishing stuff. And then I rock up on a Monday and then have to somehow justify what's happened. I no longer work with those kind of people, which is a good thing. But it is indicative of ignoring what is a process, essentially. So maybe I've spoken too much. So.
Look, I'll just pick up. In terms of the, working with, I guess it's really accepting that, heritage buildings do need to change and adapt. Obviously, in this case, as a home, needed to have, modern services, modern amenities. So I guess it's that, and, picking up on attitude, which is obviously really key, understanding that, there's things that are really of high value, high heritage value, might be the fabric, might be, a key vista or whatever it is, but it's really understanding what are those things of high value, and then, where can we actually make change? So that's a process that you need to work through, and you need to really, take the time to do that in a very sort of careful and considered way, and let that start to inform, how you make those changes. So with home, I think, there's a real hierarchy in the house. There's some formal rooms that, have incredibly beautiful finishes, and obviously, have some, great reverence to those spaces. And that was interesting, in those photos, you can see the graffiti artist had sort of graffitied, every single wall. But in the dining room, the beautiful wood panelling, they didn't graffiti the panelling. Even the graffiti artists sort of were like, oh, this is special. We won't touch this. So look, I guess it's understanding that you have to make change, but, taking the time to really understand the building, how it's put together, how you can insert those new services in a way that minimises, the impact on the building fabric, but also, taking the opportunity that because with home, a lot of things needed to be upgraded, and, so there were opportunities to run, new services or whatever it, might be. And James used the example of the the attic roof space, that, a problem, of water entry into the house and failed box cutters, became this opportunity. And then, we really sort of, went with that. The other thing about it was, because it had a hierarchy, it had service parts to the house, and those service areas had changed over time. So that was the cue for us to sort of say, well, we can make further change. So, James and Steve have both mentioned, the new additions. So they're happening, on that western side, which was always the service side of the house, an area that had already had some change. So that's, where we're making, the next round of changes and interventions, but it doesn't impact on the high value in terms of, your appreciation of the main, frontages, the views from the city and all of those things. So, I think it's just about that very, considered process. Thank you.
That's great. I think that leads into the next question for both of you, but happy for Steve to jump in too. As the document, and you've all touched on, early collaboration is really key, clear process, but with the authority check-ins to navigate what can be a complex approval process, can you talk through the moment where, I guess, being more proactive in the way you've approached it really mattered, avoiding maybe, I guess, missteps or rework or issues with authority, but how that proactive sort of attitude of working with as opposed to against helped you with these projects, not necessarily just home, but obviously particularly that.
I'm a fan of that because, as I mentioned earlier, I spent a fair bit of time in another dark place. People are scared of actually engaging, I think, because you hear the horror stories of, I invited them out and then next minute they're taking photos and now I've got a letter, blah, blah, blah. But I think just ultimate transparency and intelligence, i.e. that's key. So I've seen that with David, so maybe you want to... Yeah.
Look, I guess a shout out to Fiona Gardner, who's here tonight, who was obviously director at DETSI at the time, and look, I think that early engagement, is really key, and I guess really mapping out what the steps were, and we took a lot of very small steps because we literally started the project. The day that Jane and Steve settled on the project, we were there starting the project, so we had to engage very early in terms of taking all these small steps of, okay, well, how do we make the place safe? How do we stop water getting in? How do we, put up a scaffold and, do opening up an investigation? So all of those things required approvals and engagement, with the authorities. So it was really about, I guess, mapping out a whole pathway, but really taking a lot of very small steps along the way and reflecting, with each small step that, you're learning something and you're reflecting on what the next step might require.
Look, from the client point of view, we always wanted to... what's the point of buying a place like that if you don't actually want to make it good? So we were legitimately interested in the heritage journey. But equally, you hear horror stories, and they're true, of getting lost in a process where there are antagonistic approvers who exercise capricious judgment to stop things from happening. So there are some people on the government, on the approval side, who are frankly just over the top and sort of bitter kind of people. And so there's two sides to this. There's a legitimate client, and then there's a legitimate and flexible approval authority. Now, because this is such a high-profile place, we had certain advantages, and one of them was we hired excellent people who had credentials, but also we went in quite legitimately and said, look, we're trying to save heritage, but we're trying to modernise it and make it fit for purpose for the future, to give it another 100 years of life. And we said to various people, authorities, I won't name names, but we said, look, here's a chance to be an exemplar of how you can do these things well. So many people think you people on the approval side are a bunch of, Nazis, failed architects who want to take it out on somebody else. Equally, a lot of people who are owners are thought of as just being nasty developers who do what James said, want to knock it over in the middle of the night. So we said, let's make this an exemplar. Now, I realise not everybody can do that because not every project is this big. So if you think of, say, a small workers' cottage, which is also very important. In fact, 20 small workers' cottages are better, cumulatively become perhaps more important, particularly if they're in the context of a street, than one grander house. So I think it takes two to tango, to use the old term. So what we've got to do is say, look, let's make every project an exemplar. Let the approval authorities cut some slack to take account of what the owner is trying to do, because they're the ones who are living in it, right? So, that was the attitude we took, and I'm delighted to say that the various approval authorities did say, this can be an exemplar, and it is, and well done to all those who approved. We didn't cut corners or do sneaky stuff, but we argued some cases to do some things that a doctrinaire heritage person might object to.
And you definitely picked some extraordinary consultants, and I think that obviously helps. Just a bit of meaty discussion. So what happened when you three didn't get along? What happened when there was a decision? Give us a bit of juicy one. So what happened when...
I want to hear what he says.
I was going to... So I don't know who I'll let go first. I guess it's sort of owner and desire about what you need out of the project compared to architectural as well as heritage. So you've almost got the triad of conflicts at some point. Give us a little bit of... How did that end?
Don't forget we had Jane. So when we three didn't get along, we had Jane.
It all elevated to Jane to decide that.
She's the real boss. We all know that. I might take this one for the moment. Interestingly, now that you've actually asked that question, we're all actually quite complementary. There's always robust discussion. Shock horror.
No one asked to sit near each other. So
could you imagine? I'm a little bit more, I don't know, I really love working with David because he keeps me on the straight and narrow, and but also equally, I'm out there. I'm also on the Steve thing of ambition, and not that David's not, obviously, but he just knows all the rules. So, and he knows how to sort of bend them. So that's a good thing. Not break them. I'm talking bending them, right? As in, that's the whole point of this, is that he's doing it in a way that is still totally respectful of process, outcome, etc. But he's not out there advocating for demolition, and we do not, as a policy in the office, we do not go to court to demolish old buildings. We've said no many times, even recently. There's always getting asked to go and get paid $5,000 a day to knock down an old building, kind of thing. But we often disagree, and we somehow seem to work it all out.
Well, look, it's a creative process, and I think it's important as part of that creative process that brings some some rigour and great outcomes. So I think I didn't see this question on the list either.
Lease sales and
there's certainly plenty of robust discussion, and I mean, people might think we were disagreeing, but actually we were just I guess you're testing and retesting, and that tension actually really leads to better outcomes. So we definitely disagreed on lots of things all the time.
So I just can't imagine how any group of people on any issue, but we're talking about design and architecture today, will always agree on everything. That's impossible to imagine. And I'm actually a qualified lawyer. I didn't practice law, but I am a qualified lawyer. And what the law teaches you is there's two sides to every argument. And a barrister, for example, their job is to go and argue one side of the argument, so they have to be aware of the other to counter that. And I think that's a very good thinking process of teasing out the different angles or, the different sides of a particular argument. So we didn't turn into a debating society, but we did certainly try to say, well, let's examine what the options are here. So that's the general principle of collaboration and open discussion. But the other principle is that Jane and I were the clients. And so occasionally we used to say to the architects, listen, with your money you can go and do this, but this is our money, and this is what we're going to do.
One of my favourite Steve-isms is I don't give advice, I take advice. And I think you even today said to me, I'm not going to give you advice, I make judgment. And I mean, for me, it's been through these processes, I feel like I don't know if I'm in Stockholm Syndrome mode or something, but I feel like I've learnt to be a better thinker, because it is robust and it is rigorous. And now I understand the legal thing too. Thanks for that. But also equally as a person, I think I've had to learn to be more confident in my ideas as well. And that's a really important part of growing up as an architect, I think. Not to become dominant and domineering in that sense. I'm not that kind of architect. Yeah, but sort of being able to defend a position and having the confidence to do that. So I remember Steve accused me one day of not managing him very well. And I was like, oh, fuck it, I'm going to manage you then.
Is that possible?
Sorry for this.
No, that's fantastic. So this is more sort of to the group. I'll just run down the line and then we'll open it up to the audience for some surprise questions. So looking back, what has this project taught you about heritage as a strategic asset rather than a constraint in terms of value and character? What would you say to other owners who see heritage controls as a barrier or heritage in general as a constraint? And how can we encourage heritage restoration projects across the state? Start with Kath, or
I'm going to probably start with one of you guys on the project. Yeah.
Oh, it's more in your project too, like QHeritage. Yeah.
Do you want to go first? Oh, I'm happy to go first. Look, I guess I think QHeritage sums it up beautifully. That heritage is an opportunity, not a constraint. I've always seen it that way, that what's important is that heritage places are used and valued, people connect with them, it's the key. So and I guess it's just really understanding, how to go through that process and do it in a really respectful way. And it's valuing the process, it's embracing the process. But it is actually about having the right people and absolutely, the right attitude, because you can go into these projects with a very negative attitude, and of course there's always constraints, and the discussion sort of earlier about not agreeing. I mean, there were, this project had a whole series of research and documentation, conservation management plans, all those things that sort of set, I guess, a framework for it. So, certainly there was a set of agreed, rules of engagement, if you like, through that conservation management plan, those policies, that what drew out of that was a set of, design principles that then sort of inform the project. So, so I guess it's understanding that change is possible, but, it has to be managed and you have to work through a proper process.
I also think my experience has been like something that I was just thinking about before, like appropriate use as well. Like I think the problem is when like this building, for instance, and similar to the Red Hill skate rink when we did that, it had spent years with the owner there, well, the previous owners prior to the Surisses. They were trying to, squeeze apartments into the skate rink, and this building here, like, how do we make the best use of a physical fabric, etc., etc., and it just goes nowhere. Like, and then essentially you just get these horrific Frankenstein kind of outcomes. Whereas the DA for the Red Hill skate rink took us a month because it was a previous use of a cinema. Used to be an open air cinema. So I've always thought, look, why not reward clients for, like here, the theatre, like thanks to the thanks to Steve, obviously, but meeting Steve Sleswick from the Tivoli, who then took this building on, and they've got that's another thing about it, is the business case behind these things makes a lot of sense. So, yes, while Steve was the visionary for the project in terms of putting his money forward, he was also very across, well, what business and how has he... Like, the other thing we should mention is that he's actually got a really good agreement with the guys that actually are running the show here, right? And they get incentivised, he gets incentivised. So the business case for heritage is another side of it. It's not just about, you know, putting some paint on some stuff, but it's about the appropriate use, the kind of what is going in there, and are those things complementary? And it seems to me that it's a shame generally that clients or owners are not rewarded for bringing back a kind of a particular use that used to be there as well. And it's hard to explain, but I just think we could do it so much easier, I think, so, yeah.
Look, I'm guessing that the people who've come tonight believe in heritage. But I think many people think that heritage junkies are just this kind of narrow group of David Gold type, you know, nerdy, wonderful people, but, you know, kind of these nerdy architect types. But in reality, and I spent 5 years, I spent 5 years learning my trade in London. I went there, and so when you go to places that have enormous heritage, long and steeped history, which reflects itself in many ways, including their buildings. And so I was working in the City of London. You'd be walking around, and they're very good in London at sort of building new buildings adjacent to or part of old buildings. So you'd see the old Roman walls, you know, 2,000 years old, and they'd preserve those, so there'd be an archaeological dig going on, but then they'd be building a brand new building sort of adjacent or behind it, or incorporating it into the foyer of a building. Wonderful thing. So I think that opened my eye to that element of saying, let's preserve heritage, but also let's be able to use it. And I think actually that most people actually do like good design. They may not realise it, but I mean, who likes ugly stuff, right? I mean, and most heritage things are good to look at, and they get recognised for benefits, for special things they have. The other thing that heritage things are acknowledged for is their authenticity. They're of their place. So who doesn't like good things that are good to look at? Who doesn't like things that are of their place? So I actually think that many poor people, many more people like heritage than it's realised. But heritage slightly carries this narrow kind of meaning of the word that's just for the junkies who are into it. So I think what we've got to do is realise that there's a reason why there are these shows on TV about renovating places and all that stuff. People are interested in design and architecture, and it's natural if you are to then get interested in heritage. So I think the core interest is high, and much higher than most people would acknowledge. But then you've got the other side, and that is that if you get into the world of, if you buy a heritage place, then right now it costs you a lot of extra money. You know, you use words like process and collaboration and, you know, all that, but that's just costing bucks, right? Now, I'm into it, but I recognise it costs money. So now, can you imagine London without Buckingham Palace or St Paul's Cathedral or many little, so many things there, or France or whatever. Now, we don't have those grand buildings, but they'd be out of place if we did. But we do have amazing heritage places, and not just old things. QPAC is on one of your images there, and then there's tomorrow's heritage today. So maybe the Brisbane Stadium will end up being great heritage for Queensland. So I think, but we've got to understand that it's adding value, and so instead of it being an impediment to buy a heritage house and then go through the processes of getting the rules, I think society should acknowledge that it's much better that a beautiful old building or a more recent building is preserved and enhanced instead of allowed to just become a homeless hangout like our place was and eventually burn down. And that's what was going to happen. And then a developer would have bought it, and I'm not anti-development, but they would have bought it and said, oh, what a shame, it's gone. And guess what? We've got this big new high-rise there. But I think it's up to everybody to acknowledge that there is an extra cost of restoring a heritage house. And so I think that the 3 layers of tax recipients, that's government who tax us, should cut some slack. So the City Council receives rates. The state government receives land tax and transfer tax, property tax, stamp duty, and the federal government charges an income tax. So I think that we should look at all those 3 levels of government of supporting what heritage is. And just for a moment, think of the advantages. So London without Buckingham Palace or St Paul's Cathedral and many things would not be a tourist attraction. Brisbane is about to have the greatest show on earth, and we've got to say, how can we be famous? Now, I believe one of the things we should be famous for is our domestic architecture. Our houses on stilts, our wide verandas, our windows, our breeze flow through, all of which are a climate response, which happened well before everyone started driving Teslas. So, we responded to climate brilliantly and uniquely because we're a subtropical climate. We're not Sydney, we're not Melbourne. And so there's real power in that. There's distinction, but there's power. But we've got to convince the tourism authorities and other people who are just all about money that, and I'm not anti-money either, don't get me wrong, but that there's actually economic value in having great heritage. So I think those 3 arms of government should all acknowledge. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is destruction by willful neglect. I mean, just drive around anywhere. There's just any number of beautiful buildings that are just falling apart because the owners know that if they wait long enough, eventually they'll fall down. But the trouble is, what James said, is if you go in and buy the thing, then you're stuck with all these extra costs, blah, blah, blah. So what am I suggesting? I'm suggesting that they should cut each of the 3 levels. The City Council could perhaps have no rates for heritage places. The state government could perhaps have no land tax and concessions on transfer property tax, stamp duty. And the federal government could give tax deductions for money spent in restoring heritage houses. And then, so you want a situation where people are queuing up to say, hey, my house is heritage, or my building is heritage. I want it to be heritage. Now, I'm not saying you should overdo it because everyone says, I need more money, that's the solution, so its taxes go up. But I think there should be some balance and it should be sold on the advantages that we get from having great heritage. So there's some thoughts.
Thank you. Follow that. I guess from my perspective, just sort of building on what's been said, actually, if I think about sort of QHeritage, and I'm just sort of sat here in a Brisbane Open House event, so I've always kind of loved Brisbane Open House. There are buildings that are heritage recognised, but I think kind of the opportunity as well through this conversation, this document and Brisbane Open House, and this comes to value, is to get people to connect and understand that actually there is so much of the environment that you live in that tells the living story of us as a culture and a place. And heritage goes beyond just something that's got to, managed to get a tick box to be protected. So I think for me, the opportunity to kind of encourage people through events like Open House to see buildings and see the stories of our lives that buildings tell, but then for QHeritage to reach out to a much broader group of people, and even if it isn't a designated heritage asset, to actually see the way that you could actually work well with something with a little bit more care. I'm an urban designer, and I've been very fortunate. Steve was talking about London. I've been very fortunate in my career, cut my teeth in a lot of very, places with a lot of layers. And Brisbane has a lot of layers, but I think if we don't see them and we aren't curious about why that street is where that street is, why that building sits on that corner, and why that building holds that corner in a particular way, then we don't ask the story of, what was it at a point in time that created this place? And you start to lose the physical embodiment of your history as a community. So for me, I guess the fact that QHeritage is so accessible and it encourages people to see places and have an approach to working with those places, and hopefully it encourages, particularly the first section, let's be curious about the city around us, the places around us, and really understand what of those layers of of our evolution as a community that's built them. And encourages anybody then to lean into that and think about how they might work with their own building, which isn't heritage listed, but might be a 1930s cottage, that maybe you can work with it in a slightly different way. I think for me I really kind of love that idea about what this particular document hopefully might do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody. I think we've really touched on what the document tries to do. We want to change attitudes. We want to get it more approachable, more discussed. I think in a very changing environment that we're living in now, having authenticity around where you live and understanding deeply the meaning of why we're living where we do and what deeply connects us to those sites is important. But like Steve said, there's got to be some reciprocal benefit for that too, in the way we've got to balance it out. If we love it, it shouldn't be a penalty. If we love it, it shouldn't be such a high impost and risk that people refuse to take it on. So I think we're hoping that this discussion keeps percolating and across the state, and as Steve said, as we have global eyes on us, it now starts to understand what do we care about, and if we care about it, then as a society we should start to talk more about it and incentivise, encourage people that really want to take on that journey and do it well. So I'm going to throw to the audience, and I have no idea how this is going to roll out, because do they need to come down to the microphone? Because that could be kind of weird. No, we're not going to. They're just going to speak really loudly, and I'm going to point.
Speak up. Yeah.
Yes? Okay. Hello, Lindy. It's good if I know who they are. So.
Look, I'm an architect, but I'm not a heritage architect. I love what I've heard today, and I'd love to get more involved. I do want to ask one question, which I think is probably a challenging question. It's something that you said, Steve, and that is that heritage architecture is of its place. And I think that could be challenged from different points of views, in that the place that it is the place that's been made. And I wonder what the definition of place is. Is it the natural environment? Is it the ancient cultures? Or is it...
Yeah, no, look, that's a good point. And like, I think in everything you've got to have some balance, right? So if you go back and say it was pre-European arrival, well, then you don't have any buildings. So I think you've got to be a realist. And it's of its place and time. So there ain't going to be new Buckingham Palace. We're not going to have monarchs again at some point in the future. But there was a point in time when that's the way the world was. So I think you've got to, of its place and time, to me, is the answer.
Yeah, do you want? No, you good? Okay. All right, we'll get another. Oh, hello, over yonder. You might have to have a really big voice.
Suppose stand up. Thank you to the panel for the presentation and contribution to the heritage of the city. It was my observation and challenged in recent decades. And you've mentioned modernisation and presumably making the home functional. Would you be able to explain to us the challenges and how you bring it into the modern digital age, technologically advanced age? And I've been thinking of Wi-Fi through the house, heating, turning the lights on, by remote control solar panels without an impact on the heritage features that you want to reach out?
This could take a long time, but I'll try and be quick. Look, let's just say, yes, we did need to provide all of those new services. One of the things that we did very early on was to really understand where were some opportunities. So, for example, we saw that there was quite a big space under the floor, and because the house, had always been carpeted and the floorboards were actually just pine. So, we actually, Fiona, thank you. We got permission to take the flooring up, so we could run all the services, under the floor, which meant for the upper level we could protect the pressed metal ceiling. The other thing that we did was, because we didn't want to be running, say with air conditioning, it takes up a lot of space, so we didn't want big air conditioning ducts, exposed or even running vertically. So we then had to sort of work out, well, how do we create localised systems so that we don't have to connect them all up? So, where you might put one bit of air conditioning plant over a bathroom that can service multiple rooms, and you just drop the ceiling in one space. So it was, to the point of working with, not against. So by understanding the house, the hierarchy within the house, we could start to then see, well, where can we make impact, where can we run some of these things. There's actually a great little Harry Potter cupboard under the main stair, and when you open the door now, it's just full of all the communications, and it's this, so it became, funnily enough, the technology hub of the house is under the stair, so it's quite sweet actually, but very central, so everything can kind of go from there. So so really it was, it was all about, I guess, letting the house in a way kind of inform how you might place those things in a very considered, careful way, looking for those opportunities. But it was all about understanding the house first and then making decisions that would minimise the impact on the building fabric of the house.
Great.
Anyone want to add to that?
Do we have another question, or we'll go to Mark?
Sure. Wonderful evening, thank you. It'd be great to hear about the trades involved, and I guess that importance of the legacy of passing on things that may not be able to happen in the not too distant future.
Yeah,
You go. Yeah, I want to jump in on that because it was just fantastic to have all these artisan tradespeople. I first discovered this when I was given the honour of, or whatever, if that's the word, raising the money to complete St John's Cathedral. And there was a guy there called Peter Dare, who was a stonemason of distinction. And cathedrals are different to houses, but, basically he kind of travelled the world finding jobs. He'd love to stay in a place and do it, but you've got to go and chase where there's work. And it's a bit like that in the heritage trade. So many of us are in the specialist trades that are necessary for that we've had. So yes, it's very important to give those artisans who love their work and would much rather be doing intricate, interesting work. But if there aren't buildings going on of this nature, then their skill set will be lost. And they're often multi-generational, their dad did it and then they're whatever, and they'll be lost, which is a tragedy. So we were glad we were able to give some of those people the opportunity for them to pursue their passion, which was great. Yeah, but it's important.
That's the client answer. The reality is, no, fine. It's full of protectionism. Like, we actually did try to encourage them to, like, a lot of these guys to, you hear about, we got so-and-so out of retirement and blah, blah, blah. But do they want to share their knowledge? No, not at all. No, because they make a lot of money. And the brickie didn't want to put this on, and the plasterer was actually pretty good. It shows you who's actually in it for the love and who's in it for the money. And early days, because we had so much to do, we were even talking to TAFE at one point to try and get some of that happening, and these guys were not interested. I remember one guy actually even refused to allow, because Jane's had the whole thing documented the whole way through, but with video, and he refused and actually yelled at the videographer, "Get out of my face and don't show anybody how I do my work." Like, so you hear all this kind of romantic stuff about trades, but actually the reality is it's full protectionism, and so it's a problem, and that's why a lot of the trades are not getting expanded. I think personally, I was pretty upset about that, to be honest, because we had a great job, and we did actually talk to them about opening this thing up. So, I mean, David might have a different viewpoint, because he knows everybody. So, anyway, that was my experience.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's obviously a huge challenge moving forward. That with some trades you might only have the last person or one or two. So, obviously, it's very important that those skills are passed on, and that was definitely a challenge, and obviously some of the high hourly rates being the only trade available was also a challenge, but certainly I think we were really proud that all the trades came from Queensland, and I think that was pretty amazing actually, and in some cases they were families, as Steve said, that had a legacy where multi-generations, so that was really nice to see. For example, with brick conservation, that you had the next generation coming through and they were there, being trained. So there's definitely, there's definitely seeing opportunities for legacy, but then there's other trades where, they're not passing on that knowledge. So, we may have to sort of be importing Southerners, which we, probably prefer not to.
Excellent. We had another question down the front.
I think the story of the house, to me, seems to warrant a book. Because hearing what I'm hearing now, I just want to know how the house survived in the old days, what uses it went through, what stage it got to before it was restored, and I think it'd be a bestseller because everyone knows the house, and no one knows much about it. It's just a house sitting on the hill, but everyone would like to know a lot more about it.
Steve loves a book, so we'll throw to Steve.
You might want to answer that.
Well, I'd love it if... would you like to finance the book? That'd be great. Actually, it's funny because when Jane and I made our submission to buy it, because it was a tender, which is about price, but we thought, well, we'll obviously put forward a good price, but we'll also put forward a good argument. And one of the things that we offered to do was to hire an architectural and family historian to work with Joy Lamb to do the family history and the architectural history. Unfortunately, Joy just became... she wasn't at all interested. And in fact, she would have preferred the place burned down. So it was actually very hard to get any knowledge. Hamilton Wilson, who's the great-grandson of Alexander Blair Wilson, A.B. Wilson, who's not related to me, but was the architect who designed the house, went to Joy Lamb and said, look, we're having our 100-year anniversary, or whatever it was, for Wilson Architects, and we'd really like to have it at your house, please. We'll come in and put on a show and have some drinks and celebrate the house. And she refused them access, so she was a very difficult person. And that's a shame. I mean, so anyway, that's just a little bit of backstory, which in fact would make for a great book, so you're right.
Excellent.
We have actually done a bunch of things. There's not a book, but there's... Jane created an Instagram thingo, which you can... I'm not an Instagram person, but you can go on it apparently. I don't know, it's Twitter or something, but whatever it is. Yeah, so there's a few things around, but yeah, a book would be good.
All right, any other questions? Oh, yes, we do. I'll go this side first. Yes, go for it.
John, I actually live opposite you, so we've seen your journey for the last few years, so fantastic. I think you've been kind to yourself by saying frustrations during those years. I'm sure there's a few times behind the doors you and your wife have said some nice choice words. I'm just wondering, the future, the Lamb family had it for 120 years, this place here, your place, how do you put protection in so that another 100 years from today, we don't come back to the same situation? Because things can change. So do you have trust? How do you protect all that with all the work you've done? I mean, you certainly want to keep paying your rates, but you don't want the Shire to come in and sell it underneath the tax, so please keep paying your rates. But how do you do that, I guess? How does that work?
Well, look, I think the first thing you can do is try and keep it in the family if possible. That's a broader conversation because, anyway, without going to that, there's a whole thing about, entitlement and all that kind of stuff. But we actually applied. The first house that we bought and lived in and raised our family in was an A.B. Wilson house on Dornoch Terrace. And I actually we sought to stiffen it had a citation on it, to stiffen the citation, because we didn't want, now that we've left that, it to fall into the hands of someone who just cuts it all up and knocks it over, or keeps the old house and turns all the rest of the land into apartment buildings. So there are things that you can do. So with the heritage citation that we've got on home, aka Lamb House, once we've finished all of our building, we'll seek to strengthen the citation to take account of what we've done. Now, that's at one level costing our children or our grandchildren money, but there's a bigger cause here. So there are some things you can do. But yeah, I mean, there's always that risk, which is why I think heritage legislation needs to have teeth, but it needs to have carrots and sticks. So I talked a lot about the carrots. The carrots are some things I talked about. It's also the approval processes just need to be quicker. They need to be guaranteed timelines so that you don't get quagmired down. But anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
And we had a question over here. Yes, go for it.
I'm a failed architect and a former heritage Nazi. Former? And I'd just like to say, if it had been on my watch, it would have just sailed through. I'm very heartened to see this publication, and in my retirement years, I'm kind of trying to convince public entities to follow best practice conservation with great difficulty, and I'm hopeful that this might filter its way down from the top. And we need your help.
That warms our heart. The cockles. I'll have to get hats and t-shirts, and we'll give them out next time. Well, look, do we have any more questions, or we might wrap up and let the panel sort of mingle and head off to the bar? Oh, we have one more up here.
It's a very simple question. Have you ever considered calling it the Wilson House?
Considered, but no. Yeah, I mean, its original name is Home. It actually became known as the Lamb House. Home is embossed on the portico. So, yeah, that's the short answer.
All right, to wrap up, I might give everyone, if you had, I won't say magic wand, I'll say Yes, go.
I have a heritage house recently acquired, and I want to die there.
That's not in the manual, but...
not immediately.
Excellent.
So I'm going, if I'm sensible now, while I'm still very active and able, put a lift in, and is that going to be a problem?
I will throw to the experts, but absolutely not. I'll throw to you, David. He knows.
Well, look, there's always a way of incorporating, new elements. It's all about how you do it. So it might be So it's all about how you it might be that it's a separate structure that's, linked to your house, or it might be incorporated in a way that, minimises impact. So it's all about how you, manage the impact. Understanding the values and the fabric and how you minimise that impact. So happy to talk to you after.
Excellent. So if I run down the line here, if you had a heritage staff that you could just hit on the ground, not anybody in particular, what would you do to pivot the dialogue, attitude and outcomes of heritage in Queensland?
I thought we were finishing.
It's like just one sentence. Try to keep it to one punchy sentence.
As I said earlier, I think I really, well, first of all, I think the state heritage, they need more people. Like they're severely under-resourced, and that shows me that heritage isn't valued at a higher level in the state. So that's why you get into troubles with timing, because they've only got a few people there. So it actually needs a lot more people, similar to you guys. How many of you guys got in New South Wales?
42.
42 in New South Wales doing your stuff, and you got 5 here. So Queensland needs to kind of stop thinking of itself as a bit of a backwater cowboy kind of country, and get some, if you want to talk about the future beyond the Olympics, get serious about this. And I think that's part of the answer to your issue, Steve, about incentivisation. You can't incentivise if you don't have enough capacity. So it's like...
The main thing that I would do, and again, I'm assuming people here already believe in it, but broaden the base of belief, put together a document that shows the economic value add that's created by having great architecture and great heritage. So sell it as a positive, not just go and say, I need more money for more people, but actually say, look at the economic value that is created by this unique and distinct architecture that we have.
Look, I want to see more great project outcomes. We've got some amazing buildings in the city that are locked up at the moment. We've got the School of Arts building, in the city. We've also got the former, dental hospital. We've got the Queensland Museum. These are all, really iconic buildings for our city that are very much either underutilised or, in fact, they're just locked up. So I think... coming up to obviously the Olympics, I'd love to see some of these buildings have really amazing, reuses, cultural uses, and, be opened up. But it's all about, really, following that process and really, unlocking these places. But obviously it's going to take, quite a bit of leadership, to make that happen, and incentives, to your point, Steve.
Two. Okay, this isn't in any way engineered to Brisbane Open House support it, but for me, I think tell more stories. Tell more stories about the places that we live in and why the building's where it is, where the street is where it is, and get people to really connect with the value of them relative to your history, your heritage inheritance, and get people to value, as a result of those stories, get them to value these places rather than just sort of, we just need to replace, we just need to kind of create new buildings. You can create new buildings, new streets, but bring into those new places the stories of the past in some way. And I think the more we tell stories and get people excited about why cities evolve, why towns evolve, the more interest there'll be in actually keeping those interesting pieces from the past and weaving in the future.
All right, I've lost my microphone. Excellent. So thank you everybody for attending. I think, the panel will just now mingle, as we mentioned, over yonder near a bar probably. So please feel free to grab them and say hello.